Hi guys, so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the content that I've uploaded onto the page that we'll be looking at. My name's Donna, I teach A-level film and media studies at the college. I may have met you before at Open Evening, or you may have come to some of the Year 11 taster sessions. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the course, and then in the PowerPoint as well, there's a couple of activities that I'd like you to have a little go at. All fairly self-explanatory, but I'm just going to give you first of all some information about the course, so you kind of know what it's all about and what hopefully you'll be starting in September. So media is quite a broad course in terms of the content that we will be covering. We look at a range of different media industries and different techs within those industries. We'll be looking at film, television, magazines, newspapers, video games, radio, online media, advertising, marketing, and also music videos as well. So media is really important because we spend so much of our time interacting with various different media platforms. You may interact with some more than others, but you don't necessarily need to have a knowledge of all of them, but you will in some way all interact with most of these on a daily basis. So what I'd like you to do is think a little bit about your own kind of media consumption. What things have you watched recently that you enjoyed? Have there been any video games that you've played recently that have been particularly good or even bad in some cases? Films that you may have seen, things that you've been, I guess, kind of interacting with, maybe more so of late as well, because the media is really important in terms of shaping quite a lot of our views, opinions, thoughts on certain subject matter. So each of the texts that we'll look at, we're interested in a variety of different areas. So with film, we'll be looking at things like marketing and the film industry. With magazines, we'll be looking at language, how they're constructed, journalism, representation, industry. So print is very much in decline as more and more of us, choose to use digital platforms as opposed to more traditional physical mediums. But of course, everyone is going to use things in a slightly different way. So if you could complete the activity, send me some of the things that you interact with most of all. It will help me get an idea of the sorts of individuals you are, and what areas I might need to cover in a little bit more detail, especially if none of you read newspapers, for example. But hopefully keeping in touch with the news is still something you do, even if it isn't through a physical newspaper, but with apps, Twitter, Snapchat, for example. So in terms of the structure of the course, it's a 2-year A-level. There are 2 written exams, Component 1 and Component 2. Both of those exams are at the end of the second year and total 70% of your final grade. And then Component 3 is a piece of production work which will be creative. This is 30% of your overall grade, and there'll be 4 different briefs, and you will choose one of the briefs depending on what it is that you want to create. So usually they fall around music and music videos, TV, so kind of creating your own opening sequence for a television show. It might be some magazine journalism for a particular audience, so you would create your own front page, contents page, double page spread article, or there might be some film marketing, so you would create your own DVD cover and posters for a film that you're creating, you're coming up with the idea, the characters for, etc. All of these options will have a secondary component. So if you're making your own magazine, you would also need to have an accompanying website that would have some additional linked articles and images on. But all of these things, of course, if you don't feel confident with skills for photography or Photoshop or editing, these are obviously all things that we'll kind of learn as we go. But the coursework gives you a good opportunity to apply quite a lot of the taught knowledge, and also gives you the opportunity to create your own media production stuff as well, especially if you're thinking about going into industry. You'll develop a good range of skills, hopefully, that will be transferable. So there are 4 key areas really of media that we cover, that we'll be looking at. Media language, audiences, representation, and industry. So media language really is looking at kind of the features and the techniques used to create media products. So that could be things like genre, narrative, camera, editing, sound, lighting, digital image manipulation, all of those kind of language elements that help create a text but also then communicate to an audience as well. So with audience, we're looking at who the audience for a particular text is, how are they targeted, so if you're watching a text, is it for you? How do you know that you're the intended audience of that particular text? Maybe it's to do with gender, maybe it's to do with age, maybe it's to do with ethnicity, issues, events. And that's also something we'll touch on in media representation as well. So how are particular groups or issues being represented in media products? So this is an area where we'll look at things like ethnicity, age, gender, social issues surrounding things to do with things like poverty, especially with one of the films that we're looking at, what it means to kind of live on the breadline, being part of a marginalised group. And what that means is predominantly we see very similar representations within the media. There isn't always a great deal of diversity on offer. So that's something that we'll touch on in majority of texts actually that we cover. And then we'll also be looking at the industry that they belong to. So the companies, the processes involved in production, distribution, and the impact that that can have on many of the texts that we'll cover. So these are some of the texts that we'll look at. So film marketing, we'll be looking at Black Panther, Marvel, of course, which is a mainstream American film, but quite different as a mainstream film, given its representation, the fact that this is, really your first superhero film that has a predominantly black cast. So it's kind of seen as more of a cultural event, as well as being, another instalment of a hugely successful film franchise. And this will be coupled with Daniel Blake, which is a very different film, British social realism, created not so much for entertainment as it is to raise awareness of the issues being discussed within this particular film. The films themselves aren't really the key focus. What we're predominantly looking at here is how they're marketed, who the audience is for both of them, and what it also says about the British film industry and what it says about the American film industry as well. We will watch the films. It's hard to talk about them and not watch them. Again, you don't need to have seen them previously. You just kind of need to be open to watching stuff that maybe you wouldn't really have watched or thought about before. We'll also be looking at music videos. So the two that we'll be looking at, we've got Formation by Beyonce, which has some really interesting representations of gender and ethnicity. And then Riptide by Vance Joy, which, if any of you have seen, is a little bit surreal. And that's the whole point of watching that. It's a little bit out there, it's a little bit different. So yeah, music videos. We'll also be looking at video games as well. So the set product is the whole Assassin's Creed franchise. I don't know if this is still hugely relevant, but it's still on the spec. So if any of you are fans of video games, we'll talk quite a lot about the industry, especially things to do with regulation and censorship. Video games quite often targeted for being, having hugely sort of negative effects on audiences. And this is largely because more traditional mainstream media doesn't really understand video games, because even though they've been around for a significant period of time, they haven't been around for quite so long as newspapers and films have, for example. So we'll talk quite openly about the video game industry, but this will be our kind of main focus, predominantly because it's been quite open with its representation of gender and especially ethnicity as well, especially with something like Assassin's Creed Liberation. Newspapers, everyone's favourite. So the two papers that we'll be focusing on are the Times and the Daily Mirror. The Daily Mirror, tabloid, red top, more left-wing politically, and then something like the Times, which is more quality news, with kind of a much sort of higher social demographic in terms of content that it writes about. So we'll be talking quite a lot about politics, current affairs, current events. We'll be looking at newspapers quite a lot because this particular text could come up in any section of the Component 1 exam. But it's quite interesting, sort of gives us a little bit of an insight into news and how news is created, and also how we respond to it as well. So, you know, hugely relevant with some of the big stuff that's been going on in the country over the past couple of years. So we'll hopefully give you a little bit of an insight into the industry, even if you're not massive news fans. Gives you an idea of various different insights into the importance of being informed. We'll also look at advertising as well. So some old, quite retro film marketing for something like Kiss the Vampire, which is an old horror film. We've got some quite interesting representations of gender. Tide, which is from the 1950s, an American advert for washing powder. And what we have here again is quite an interesting representation of gender, but also ethnicity as well, the lack therefore of different ethnicity groups, and certainly different age women as well. And then we'll also look at WaterAid, which is a charity advertising company. Again, interesting to look at for gender and also representation of ethnicity. And in this sense, how charity advertisements can be responsible for creating an idea about a particular place or a particular group of individuals actually is quite false. So charity advertisements, even though they're trying to do something good, raise money and awareness for a particular cause, they can also be quite harmful as well. So something sort of interesting to cover as well. And then we have radio. This is the radio element that we'll be talking about. This is a text called Late Night Woman's Hour, and Woman's Hour in general. Radio is a little bit of a dying medium, really. Not many people listen, well, not many young people listen to the radio anymore, because there are many other different ways of finding content. But Late Night Women's Hour, as it suggests, is about women. It gives you quite interesting insights into issues that affect women's lives in a variety of different forms. Unfortunately, most of the texts that we cover do focus on women rather than men, so I do apologise, but hopefully that won't be too problematic for you all. And then component 2, so this is the second year's content. There is less to cover in the second year, but we do look at text in a little bit more detail. So component 2 will be television, online media, and also print-based as well. So here you can see 2 TV shows. Humans, which is a Channel 4 drama, sci-fi, and then The Returned, which was also on Channel 4, which is a French text, but hugely popular, even though it's not in the English language. And that's quite common now, that we get quite a lot of products coming in from Europe, especially products that are slightly darker. So The Returned is kind of crime, thriller, but mostly it centres around the undead. So we've got kind of a zombie film as well. It doesn't really deal with the apocalypse, but more so about the dead coming back to life. So do quite interesting texts, very different in terms of genre. So if you're interested into your television, we will watch a few episodes of these and do some analysis of a variety of different things. We'll also look at magazines. So our 2 set products will be The Big Issue, which is a charity, kind of a street newspaper, but it has more of a magazine feel, which deals with lots of issues, but primarily its focus is homelessness and what can cause homelessness. It's very much social enterprise, so it tries to raise awareness and money for particular causes. Interesting text, very different probably to anything that you would have read before. And then we'll also look at Vogue as well, so contemporary Vogue, but mainly looking at Vogue from the 1960s, because of course again that gives us a very different feel to what was going on in the 60s, especially when women were concerned, and also actually where men were concerned as well. And then our final text will be online media or online media texts. So currently the focus is still on Zoella, although I'm not sure she's entirely as relevant as she was, let's say, but we'll give it a go anyway. And also Applicant, which is more so the website that we'll be looking at, which is a website for a gay men's magazine, but we'll be predominantly looking at the website for it. So online media, of course, I don't know if you guys will be the same, but that's kind of primarily how younger people now entertain themselves rather than kind of more mainstream forms. And then just on the slide here is an example of some of the student production work that you might end up doing. So if you've got an interest in kind of graphic design, or you think you might want to go into the industry and kind of make your own media products, here we've got an example from the film marketing brief that I spoke very briefly about. This is some student work from last year, and as you can see, professionally created, looks like a media product. So here we've got a DVD cover and a couple of posters for a sports drama film created by one of the previous AT students last year. So lots of options for the coursework. And again, you'll hopefully learn a variety of different skills over the course of the 2 years. Certainly research, observation and analysis, organisation, planning and design, technology and software as well. So if you're not overly familiar with things like Photoshop and Premiere, then you'll hopefully learn those skills as well as digital video filming and editing, web design kind of, with the websites that you'll produce for your coursework. We'll use templates, so you won't have to build your own website, but you will need to know how they function with some assistance as well. And of course, conceptual and theoretical understanding of the media as well. So we'll talk quite a lot about lots of different media theories and what that tells us about the content that we're looking at. So media really offers a variety of different elements to study. Focuses on new technologies, gaming, social media, streaming, although probably don't seem that new in comparison to lots of other traditional media forms. They are. Production work, so it'll give you a chance to produce media products in line with your own interests, and hopefully also emphasise some sort of contemporary issues and debates, get you thinking about things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily have thought about all that much before. So quite broad, quite varied, quite open. We'll give you a variety of different skills. And then we'll think a little bit more about why media products are created, and this really ties into the tasks that I'm going to get you to do that is attached to this PowerPoint. So I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but the main reason why media products are created: to entertain or to engage an audience, to inform, to initiate debate and discussion, but ultimately to make money. This is a big industry, big business, generates a lot of income, lots of money for a variety of different big media companies, and ultimately the goal is to make money back on the investment, but also, you know, to entertain, to inform, and also to elicit some kind of discussion as well. So these are some of the things that we can think about if we're analysing a particular media product, and this is really what we'll start off with. Kind of the first few lessons will be about how to analyse media text. So we've got a range of different things that we can look at. We've got what we call mise-en-scene. So this essentially refers to everything within a frame. So if you're watching a particular TV show or a particular film, mise-en-scene would enable you to analyse things like costumes, props, colour, lighting, setting, performance, how your characters interact with each other. Can also give you a time period as well. So if it's set modern day, you know, if it's set in the 80s or 90s or even further back. So mise-en-scene kind of gives you a sense of time, place, character, so how you should be responding to particular individuals, for example, particular pieces of costume or prop that might be significant. We can also look at use of camera, so this would be your shot type. So are we looking at close-ups, are we looking at long shots, mid shots? But in here as well we have things like movement and camera angle as well. These are all things that I'll talk to you about and we'll discuss in far more detail than just in a couple of minutes in a taster session. We can also look at editing, so how something is pieced together. For the purpose of the task that I'm going to get you to do, you can just look at things like pace. So does it feel quite fast in terms of how the action unfolds? Does it feel quite slow? Why might that be the case? And then we have sound, so use of music, sound effects, dialogue, all of those things obviously create meaning as well. And then within that as well, we've got things like genre. So is it quite evident the genre that a text belongs to? We can identify this through what we call codes and conventions, you know, so things that you would expect from different genres. And then narrative. this is really looking at what the story is, how it's structured, what's the main story, what are the events that are kind of presented to try and engage the audience in what it is that we may or may not be looking at. So what we're going to do is I'd like you to look at this in relation to Stranger Things. So there's a couple of tasks here. It doesn't really matter if you haven't seen Stranger Things, but I would question why you haven't seen it. Is to list some of the expected features of the horror and also sci-fi genre as well. Stranger Things very much kind of classed as a hybrid, so it's a text that mixes lots of different genre-specific elements together. Make a list. What kind of things would you expect to find in a horror? What kind of things would you expect to find in a sci-fi? And then when you're done with that, I'd like you to look at the video that's embedded in here. It's about 6-7 minutes. I'd like you to watch the video. So it's a feature. Basically, it's the opening of the first series of Stranger Things. I'd like you to do some analysis and think about the features at the bottom of the slide. Think about mise-en-scene. Think about use of camera, editing, sound. How do we know what genre the text belongs to? What do we think the main story is? Because with any text that we look at, we need to be analysing how it's been constructed. How is it made to grab the audience? How is it meant to kind of pull you in, engage you, and essentially make you want to watch more? Or, in the case of a film, if we're looking at a trailer, paying to go to the cinema to watch it, buying it on DVD, for example. So I'm not going to do this with you, but the video is embedded, so you can have a little watch, make some notes, watch it a couple of times, and then you can send me what you think, and also send me your genre conventions list as well. And then we want to think about this. So identify the 5 ways in which the sequence is constructed to grab the audience's attention. So you can think about this personally. If it's something that you think you would watch, if you haven't already, what is it about it that is likely to hold the audience's attention? And actually, if it's not for you and you think it fails to grab your attention, what is it doing wrong? What could it be doing to hold your attention a little bit more? So think a little bit about audience. Who do we think the audience for the text is likely to be? So something like Stranger Things is going to be quite a broad age range, probably going to be quite a broad gender as well, probably for a lot of different audiences, given that it focuses on lots of different subject matter, lots of different genres as well. So have a little think about that too. And then finally, what I'd like you to do, because of course you will be doing your own piece of creative production work, I'd like you to come up with an idea for either a new horror or new sci-fi series, or a little bit of a hybrid between the two. Think about characters, events, settings. What would you call it? And then use the ideas in your mind map to create an opening sequence storyboard or poster for your TV series. Label your storyboard or poster to identify the main genre features. And again, don't worry if you're not a brilliant artist, it's kind of more about the ideas. So what I've included on the Mahara page is a storyboard template, which you can have a little go at drawing if you wanted to, or if not, a poster of some kind. So you can make use of anything that you can find around the home. Again, if you can draw, brilliant, but you might want to do some photoshopping of some images, just something that kind of demonstrates what it is that you might try to create, and then I'll have a little look at those. They don't have to be perfect, especially if you don't really have a great access to a lot of equipment at the minute, but you've all got your phones. There are numerous apps out there to create different images, etc. So have a little go, see what you come up with. Okay, and then if you've got any questions, please ask. But as I said, I'll upload a very simple storyboard template for you to maybe draw, or if you wanted to do it electronically, you could do that as well. Okay, so if you've got any questions or queries or anything about the course, feel free to email, although I think you'll be given a link to submit any work that you produce. But if you've got any questions or queries, you can email me, and hopefully once everything is back to normal, we'll see you at enrolment, or if not, I'll hopefully see you in September. Take care, bye bye.